This is a Nice Guys Patreon exclusive.
Welcome to another NHL team season preview video. 32 teams in 32 days continues through the month of September. Ian Cameron, Alex B. Smith, and look who is with us to join us on the LA Kings reunited, and it feels so good. It's our old friend, one of the original OG members of the Ice Guys from our very first full season of the show back in 2016, 2017, and we are back, and he is back on this LA Kings preview. He'll be joining us for a few team previews here upcoming, starting with this one involving the LA Kings. It's our old friend from Las Vegas, Dana Lane. Dana, it's good to see you again.
It is an absolute pleasure to be back with you guys. It's been so long, and I have to tell you, and I'll say it publicly as well, and I've told you both privately, I'm so impressed where you both have taken this show over, since over the last 8 years. It's impressive because a lot of people would have said, wow, this is too difficult. It's too time consuming. Not you guys. You took it to another level. Now look at you now, and you're ready to go into the stratosphere.
Well, we appreciate that. We're sure hoping so. It has grown over the years, and we have an unbelievable following. The live bet casts, I think, are something that's unique to our show that we do throughout the season, where we bring on our viewers and listeners. We bring on some player guests that can join us when they can, and it's just a great time. And, of course, daily shows where I think we're still, well, maybe someone else is trying to go 7 days a week, but if they are with the hockey show, I haven't seen it, and I've not seen one as good. So, like I said, 7 days a week. It's a show that we put in a lot of time, and it's a lot of time, it's a lot of work, a lot of prep, but it's worth it because of the reception that our show gets, no question. Dana, it's good to see you again. Good to have you back. Let's talk a little Los Angeles Kings, because this is a very interesting team to talk about coming into this season. This is a team that's been in the playoffs, hasn't exactly advanced far. The Edmonton Oilers have been the bane of their existence the last 2 years, knocking them out in the first round. And I know Alex will get to this. There's question marks about whether this team will even be participating potentially in the Stanley Cup playoffs this year, because there are some question marks with this group. I think when you look at up front, obviously, now he's been injury prone, but Victor Arvidsson goes to Edmonton, but they bring in a former Oiler the other way, and Warren Fogle, trying to infiltrate and insulate their top six forward group. You look at what they've got. They have a potentially very strong top line still with Adrian Kempe, Anze Kopitar, who still can play at a very high level. It's only him and Drew Doughty as far as the two remaining members of the LA Kings from those cup-winning days last decade. And alongside them, the first thought that they might be putting Alex Laferriere up on that top line. So something to watch for there. Kevin Fiala, Quentin Byfield, who took significant strides forward, I thought, in his career last season, without a doubt. You look at what he was able to put up there on the board, 55 points in 80 games. It was a big step forward for a guy that was a first-round pick of the Kings years ago. Definitely a good sign moving forward. The bottom six is filled out with Trevor Moore, who's pretty good here so far with LA. Philip Deneau. They bring in Tanner Jeannot, who really didn't give Tampa Bay much of anything offensively, but he'll be physical. He'll drop the gloves every now and then, so they'll get that element from his game. And then we're looking at probably Trevor Lewis, the old veteran, Alex Turcotte. And watch out for Akil Thomas. He flashed in little spurts last year with the LA Kings, expected to be on the bottom six, but someone that I thought I was pretty impressed with at times last year. Then on the blue line, obviously you've got Drew Doughty, Mikey Anderson, the top pair. I thought actually Doughty had I think for a guy that looked like he was falling off a little bit 2-3 years ago, I thought he had a pretty good season overall for the LA Kings last year. Showed he's still got a lot of gas still left in that tank. They've got Gavrikov too, who they brought in to be sort of that more of a shutdown, stay at home, keep the puck out of the net type of defenseman. They do have a lot of youth that potentially could get better on this blue line, and it starts with Brandt Clarke. I think the sky's the limit for Brandt Clarke on that blue line. It's a player that I saw a lot in junior, a lot when he was at the World Junior Hockey Championship as well. He's got all the tools, great skater, chips in points, good shot from the blue line. Got that offensive flair, and I think he continues to grow in terms of his shutdown, stay-at-home defensive game as well. Joel Edmondson, I don't mind them bringing him in. He split time with Washington and Toronto last year. Shutdown, stay-at-home defenseman, block a ton of shots, be physical, clear the front of the net. Very simple game out of Joel Edmondson, and certainly you need that kind of a defenseman to help out A goaltending situation that I have very, very shaky confidence in going into the season. How could you not? I mean, you're looking at Darcy Kemper and oftentimes, as we call him, Dana, Big Civ Dave, Dave Riddick for the LA Kings. Let's start with Kemper, right? This is a guy that won a Stanley Cup in Colorado, kind of masked by the fact that it was a high-scoring team with 4 lines of depth, a blue line that was very, very sturdy in front of him. And the year they won the Stanley Cup, guys, Colorado was a puck possession magnet. A big reason why Kemper was so good is because, well, the other team didn't have the puck a whole lot. You know, he didn't have to face, a barrage of shots, a barrage of high quality, high danger scoring chances on a nightly basis. Well, now here in LA, things are a little bit shakier. They don't possess the puck as much. And Darcy Kemper's coming off easily the worst season he's had in many years. I mean, that season last year was a disaster for him with the Washington Capitals. I mean, when Charlie Lindgren is getting all the starts instead of you, tells you all you need to know that it wasn't a good enough season for Kemper in net. And if he struggles, does anyone really have faith that David Riddick's going to go on a 20, 30 game run and carry the team in net? I don't. So the goaltending is a huge, huge concern for me going into this season. You look at it, Jim Hiller retained as the permanent head coach. They removed the interim tag. I thought that's kind of on the cheap move. I thought there were other options out there that would have been better at the head coaching spot than Jim Hiller. I mean, how's Jay Woodcroft still unemployed? I'm still wondering that to this day. When's he going to get another opportunity here? I thought LA could have been someone that could have gone after his services and chose not to. So I'm pessimistic with LA. I think actually, too, if you look at their defense and their goaltending, combined with the fact that we saw Quentin Byfield start to pop, you still have Kempe, you still have Kopitar, you've got Warren Fogle, who can chip in some pucks. Maybe this team plays a little more offense better, uptick on offense, maybe a bit of a downward turn on defense potentially, especially with that questionable goaltending situation. Maybe a few more overs involving the Kings this year potentially. But as far as from a side perspective, no bueno for me with the Kings. If I'm playing the Kings from a future standpoint, under their point total, and I don't even think it's the worst thing in the world to take a shot with as far as to miss the playoffs, take the no that they won't make the playoffs and that they will miss. Because look, the Western Conference, it's not getting much easier this season, and you've got enough question marks, especially with that blue line goaltending combo, that has me worried about the prognosis of the LA Kings here in 2024, 2025. Alex, we'll turn to you. What do you think about the LA Kings?
We were talking off air about how playing a sport doesn't necessarily translate into other avenues. That could be coaching, that could be general managing, that could even be what we do here as sports bettors. And I'm saying that specifically because I look at general manager Rob Blake, and I look at some of the moves he's made in the last couple of years. And I like what this team has done as far as building. I like the way that they've been drafting. Shout out to their scouts. The scouts have done a tremendous job, I think, in kind of building this team out. But one thing that remains to be a big question mark is the goaltending. And I think another issue is the coaching. And I think those are two things that were not adequately filled, in my opinion, in this offseason. I think retaining Hiller was not the best move when there were other guys available, guys like Jay Woodcroft, guys like Dean Evason. I think they both would have been better fits and better choices for this Kings team, the way that they're made up and the path in which they're trying to go within how tough the Pacific Division and the Western Conference is. And then you look at the goaltending. You get Darcy Kemper, which is basically your resolve for getting out of the bad trade that was getting Pierre-Luc Dubois, where you end up losing, Gabe Velarde and Alex Iafallo, two quality players who I think fit very well with this team, who are going to be dearly missed again this season like they were last year. And you're able to only just get back in return Darcy Kemper, who once played in LA briefly, who's been bounced around the league from time to time. And like I said, no one's really writing home that he was the end-all, be-all reason why Colorado won a Stanley Cup. There's 4 or 5 names that will come up in front of him every single time you talk about that team. I don't like the
maybe
makeup
to go
of the
higher
team.
than that.
Yeah, right. I'm being generous saying 4 or 5 names, but yeah, you can really put 7 or 8 in front of them. So I just don't like where this team is made up for right now this year. I like how things are going in the future, but I think Rob Blake needs to make some bigger moves in order for this team to be a true contender in the West, a true Stanley Cup contender. This goaltending room is not going to do it. Having Kemper and Riddick, and then you have Phoenix Copley coming off of a torn ACL, which is a year removed off of his best season in his professional career, as your 3 goaltenders. that's not really rolling in with a comfortable slate that you can rely on in a 7-game series against an Edmonton team, against a Vegas team. If you happen to draw a wild card spot, you got to battle a Dallas or a Nashville. You can't match up, and even with some of the talent they have on the front end offensively, I still don't feel like this is a team that can keep up in a big time playoff series. I don't feel like they can win big time games yet. They don't seem to be big game ready. And I think that's what's going to come down to, where if they're in that wild card race with 2 weeks left to go, needing another 8 to 10 points, I don't see them winning those big games in conference play, in divisional play, to find themselves in the postseason this year. So shop around for the number, because I'm seeing anywhere between plus 185 to as high as plus 200 at BetMGM. But I bet no that the LA Kings do not make the Stanley Cup playoffs this year. And I'm also looking at their under point total at 96.5.
Yeah, I mean, it's almost unfathomable when you look back on the Pierre-Luc Dubois trade. Of course, Velarde, Iafallo going the other way to Winnipeg in that deal. That now we sit here, middle of September, season on the horizon, and the only return they have to show for trading Pierre-Luc Dubois is Darcy Kemper, who is coming off the worst season of his NHL career. Yeah, so disappointing. Rob Blake, the GM, not Rob Blake, the player. Let's put it that way so far in his front office career as GM of the Kings. Dana, have at it. What do you think for the Kings upcoming this season?
Yeah, I pretty much agree with just about everything you said. And if you break it down from a handicapping standpoint, this is the Kings in a nutshell. You can always bet on the Kings to play well against the teams that they should play well against. But when we're talking about them playing Edmonton, they were 2-7 against Edmonton last year. 0-3 against the Dallas Stars last year, 22-44 against those top echelon teams in the Western Conference since 2016. They're fantastic as a favorite overall, but when you break it down further, we see that most of those wins as a favorite comes against teams, not against teams that are 500 or less. They're coming against teams that are playing 450 hockey or less. And they're 80-92 against teams playing over 450 over the last couple of years. So, I mean, that's really where it breaks down. And, just to give you kind of a contrast, the Vegas Golden Knights are the best team in the NHL against teams playing 450 hockey or better, winning 56% of their games. So that's really where you have to bring up this level. I mean, there's a long way, and I can't really even make a case for them making the postseason. I think they're going to be in the mix. I think they're going to be there right at the end. But I also have questions. We know that, with Hiller coming in, it's like, okay, he's going to be a guy, and word is so far that he's not quite Daryl Sutter, but he has worked for Jacques Lemaire. He has worked for Babcock. He has worked for Barry Trotz. So you can't help but to think he's going to have some of that in him. But I also think he's much more of a player's coach than those coaches are. And I think it's going to be his ability to get through to the younger players is where he's going to find success. Now, one of the things that I cannot, when I hear these things come out of camp, I say to myself, oh man, really? We're going to go that route? And I hear them saying things like, we want to be more physical. Oh, that's great. Be more physical. Well, there is a difference between, wanting to finish your checks and just being maybe a little bit sloppy just for the sake of being physical. Being able to separate the puck from your opponent, the change possession, that's being a quality physical team. We've seen the Kings in the past be a physical team, but it was just to be out there and to show their physical dominance. Now, we look at teams like Dallas. We look at teams like Carolina, who are not physical teams at all, have tremendous success, physical at the right time, but really not that physical mentality. And they've had tremendous success, mostly regular season, or definitely regular season success. But I'd rather hear, like when Dan Bialsma says, I want to play faster. I like that because that gives me something. But when I hear I want to play more physical, I don't know. It's like my daughter when she says she wants to be a beautician. I'm like, oh, really? Okay, that's our goal. Okay. But yeah, it's look, a lot of people think they're a little thin at that forward position, guys. I think they have pieces there. They have veteran pieces for sure. You got Fiala and Byfield, who are 20-goal guys. I think, not only did Trevor Moore pop in with his first 20-goal season,
you could have a 31-goal scorer and more on the third line this season. Yeah.
So I think when you're looking at this, and I'm not comparing it to the teams that are going to go deep into the postseason, teams I think, but they do have some pieces enough to keep them there at the end. But the problem is, the one thing we can never handicap and the one thing we can never anticipate is how our injuries going to affect any team. And I think this specific team, if injuries become a problem with their goaltending, I think that's where the hammer falls on them making the postseason.
Absolutely. I just to recap, because we want to throw out last year's stats a little bit, just to give us a little bit of an indicator. Will a team go improve or maybe decline in a certain area? The LA Kings last year, as far as team defense and goals allowed per game, only Winnipeg and Florida in the regular season gave up fewer goals per game than the LA Kings. LA Kings 2.56 goals per game allowed. Last year was even a little bit better than teams like Carolina and Boston. Well, I'm very confident saying that number's headed down this season, in my opinion, with the blue line questions of the depth there, especially when I like Brandt Clark, but he's going to add a lot of offense, and he's still developing in terms of the defensive side of the puck as a young blue liner. And then you've got the shakier goaltending. So I think that number, I'm quite confident in saying they're not going to be the number 3 team in the NHL in goals against per game this season.
And that's the thing too. With this team, and like I said, Danny, you mentioned with Hiller, the coaches that he's worked under, where he's come from. Where is their identity going to land when, once again, playing in those big time games? Are they going to be a team that can try and outrace you and use their physicality, but to get things generated on offense, or are they going to try and slow things down and wear teams down and try to bang the body low, and then that way try to win these games 3-2, 4-3, which that doesn't seem to be the way to get things done in the Pacific Division, more often than not.
Well, this, Alex. I mean, with the goaltending the way it is, and you brought this up too, Ian, I mean, you really are going to have to carry the puck. Is this a team that you feel like is going to carry the puck? And if you're not able to do that, then you are going to have to win the special teams battle. Now Hiller, at some previous stops, have been brought in to, be basically a special teams guru. In his first year as an assistant with the Kings, I mean, they did have a tremendous, I think they were 4th in the league in the power play, but then last year kind of dipped back down again. Now we're in a situation where we don't really know what we're going to get again from their power play. And we know it's above average, but it's going to have to be way above average to make up for what I think is going to be a lack of scoring. And if they don't have a lack of if they have a lack of scoring, unlike in Dallas, they don't have the horses to outscore their defensive deficiencies.
Yeah, exactly right. And you look at the penalty kill too. That's going to, I think, take a tumble a bit. Believe it or not, the LA Kings last year penalty killing number 2 in terms of percentage, 84.58%. Carolina is the only team that had a higher penalty kill percentage. But you actually look at the playoffs, you guys. Who had the worst penalty kill percentage in the playoffs? The LA Kings, because the Edmonton Oilers lit them up like a fucking Christmas tree in that first round with the power play. And so the big difference there. And I think, again, everything defensively is going to take a dip this year, in my opinion, for the Kings. They were a middle-of-the-pack offensive team as far as goals for per game last year. I think that's probably going to be in and around that same area, maybe a slight increase, because, look, they got a 30-goal scorer on the third line maybe in Trevor Moore. So they do have weapons there. So I think there'll be a middle of the pack, maybe slightly in the top half of the league offensively, and they're definitely taking a tumble defensively, which was why I think there might be some value with LA Kings games over the total this season, potentially.
Let me ask you something about that, though, Ian.
Yeah.
Do you think that Trevor Moore, what do you expect out of him this year? If you don't expect him to get to that 30-goal plateau again, which – as a third liner, I mean, that's extremely difficult to expect year in and year out. Maybe he'll move up. But if you don't expect that out of him, Ian, who's picking up the scoring slack for a team that I can't lean on to score?
Well, it's not going to be Trevor Lewis in that bottom 6. It's not going to be Tanner Jeannot in that top 6, or bottom 6, I should say. You'd have to hope that look, I saw actually some flashes from, like I said, Akil Thomas. You got to hope he maybe is going to maybe play above expectation for you this season. for sure. Philip Deneau is a guy that had zero offense his final year in Montreal, but he's actually picked it up a little bit at least here with the LA Kings. I mean, a couple years ago for him, it was that first season in LA, he had 27 goals at 18, fell to 17 last year. So he's someone that's going to be very important. We know tremendous defensive center, always has been his whole career, but now you're going to need a little offensive punch from him now as well. No doubt. As far as and any futures before we wrap up the LA Kings, any futures, Dana, in particular that you're interested in with the LA Kings before the season?
I think they're going to squeeze into the postseason. I'm not a big futures guy just because I don't like to have my money tied up for so long. And so therefore I don't really look at it because gambling, especially when we're looking at seasons that are of such length as the NHL season is, from month to month, from week to week, an identity can change. So really at this point, betting futures, I might bet a yes or no on whether or not they make the postseason. But I do think that they will, but I think they're going to squeeze in just to get there. And maybe it's because of mediocrity, in the Western Conference, they just kind of get in. They just kind of get in because they're just, they're the ones left standing, and they found the final chair. But I just try to take things game by game, and of course we all try to just manage our bankroll. So I think it's easier to do that on a day by day basis rather than kind of cross my fingers that I know what's going to happen in 7 months.
That's a fair statement. And obviously, I know there's a lot of bettors that are in that camp where they just don't want the money tied up for 6 months on end like that. One last thing I want to point out. The LA Kings last year, bottom 10 in the NHL in profitability. I think if you bet one unit on the LA Kings in all 82 of their games last year, you are ending up down 6 units last season. And now we project them to be probably a little bit worse this year. So the ability to make money with the LA Kings this year, I'm not sure you're going to be able to when it's all said and done.
There are teams that fade LA against, in particular, to play on fading LA. Nashville was one of them last year. I had biggest play of the year I cashed was a money line spot on Nashville against LA. I think they have a record now going back 16-5 against the Kings. Dana, you mentioned the record against Edmonton. They've struggled against, Seattle played them fairly tough as well. So they're teams that the Kings struggle against that you can find spots and some trends to kind of go bet against during the regular season. But one thing you mentioned about was Akil Thomas. If he can be a guy that can sneak into that top 6 role, maybe there are some injuries and he ends up being a goal scorer. You can take a look at him at FanDuel. I'm seeing 100-1. For him to win, the Calder Award. I mean, now you're not betting him to win, obviously, with that price. But if he can be one of those top 3 finalists, give you some maneuver, some wiggle room as you get closer toward June, that wouldn't be a bad ticket to behold, potentially.
I like the idea, though, if they follow through on this, I like the idea of giving Alex Laferriere the chance. Maybe on that top line with Kempe and Kopitar, because I thought he showed some jam in the playoffs. I know the numbers weren't great offensively, but he's buried in the 3rd and 4th line most of last year. I think the fact that he's going to get a chance to play top line minutes with 2 of the best players. And by the way, too, another thing that's reason for optimism offensively with LA, there's more goals out of Adrian Kempe than the 27-28 he scored last season. We know he can get to 30 or 40 when he's really on and can stay healthy. So you're hoping for that as well with Adrian Kempe. And by the way, we always say this about Alex Laferriere. No, he is not from Quebec. He is not French-Canadian. I'm sick of people getting that all mixed up. He's from New Jersey. Okay.
That was my second guess.
Yeah. Yeah, I'm sure. Yeah, exactly. That's the clear second choice. New Jersey would be where a guy like Alex Laferriere with a name like that would be from. But awesome stuff, Dana Lane. Good to have you back. Alex B. Smith. This has been your Los Angeles Kings team season preview as 32 teams in 32 days rolls along right here on the Ice Guys.